I started with Halo CE when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I grinded that game. I grinded Halo 2, grinded Halo 3.
I'm curious, what does it mean for a 4 or 5 year old to grind Halo 1? What are your memories of that time frame?
I actually didn't even have my own account. Whenever I would play Halo 2 online, it would just be my brother's account. So I could only play whenever he wasn't playing. Elementary school, right? Like, I don't know how old I am, like 8 or 9. I would wake up at like 5:30, 6 a.m. just to try to get like an hour of Halo 2 time in right before I went to school, just because like I was having so much fun with it. I'd be like, all right, I need to get a kill tech like before I go to school today. You know what I mean? I would set like small goals like that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tide the Leader, a podcast dedicated to exploring the past, present, and future of competitive Halo. I'm Mikowski. Joined alongside me each and every single week is my duo, Eli the Ninja, and our special guest this week needs no introduction, maybe a little bit of hype. He's the coldest sniper in HES. He's the iciest slayer in Game 5s, and you might just see him throw down a Repulsor 360 overkill against the HES's best. Please welcome to the show, Frosty. Frosty, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, man. Well, with every show, we usually like to start off with the origin story, but with HES London fresh on the mind, let's start there. After a third place finish at Arlington, seemingly everyone in the community counted you guys out. Bravo and Onset even claimed that the Big Three had became the Big Two with Optic and SSG. Only 2 of the 7 HES broadcast team predicted FaZe to win. Was this the first time in a long time that you guys had a chip on your shoulder? It felt like the roster had been counted out, or was most of that noise from the community a moot point?
I feel like, yeah, there's definitely a really big chip on our shoulder going into this event. I'd say it's not something that we haven't dealt with before. I feel like whenever we picked up Renegade, there was question marks. I feel like there's always kind of ups and downs throughout the year as well, where people are kind of, not really sure where we're ending up. But yeah, I'd say the gap between, I guess, like the Big Three seemingly was a little bit bigger than it normally was, considering how Arlington went, right? Yeah, it's not something that, in our heads we're like, damn, like, are we really outside the top 3? You know what I mean? Like, could we really not, go toe-to-toe with those guys? I think it was more so like a storyline, I guess. I guess it helped as far as like lighting the fire under us as a team going into that event.
Yeah, I've always thought that, once you've won everything as you and your teammates have, it's like sometimes hard to stay motivated for every single tournament day in, day out and really grind super hard. So yeah, I'd say maybe that little bit of extra motivation had you guys come in full form to the tournament. We actually interviewed Renegade shortly after Arlington. And at the time, he said you guys were still kind of adjusting to the bandit meta and perhaps some unintentional changes to the spawn system that happened during the off season. Was this a big adjustment for you guys that you worked on after Arlington? And did it help change maybe the structure you guys had for different plays in game?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say even before Arlington, obviously we were trying to get adjusted, but I feel like the meta shift with not only the bandit, but like you said, with the unintentional changes like the spawn system and things like that, I feel like it really changed the game. Me personally, I'm like, we can get into this later, but I'm not a huge fan of this meta at all right now. As much as I love the bandit and the core of the game, I shouldn't say love, but I mean, I think it's all right. I think it's not very competitive right now at all, like whatsoever, but that was a big thing we were trying to get adjusted to. So having placed third at Arlington, we really tried to hit the lab going into London, and we worked on a lot of things. We talked over a lot. We really had to get adjusted to this new style of play with the bandit and with the spawns. I feel like as a spectator, it's kind of hard to really see how big the changes actually are. There's a couple situations per game where you're like, wow, this situation makes zero sense. Like, it's almost like a coin flip. It's like you have no idea. You couldn't have accounted for this to happen in game, and you kind of just have to react in the moment. And it's very much like more random, I would say. It's not something you have control of as much as you did before. That was one thing we kind of had to rewrap our heads around and really get into the mindset of like, oh, okay, we need to like uh, switch up how we think about certain plays and like, really embrace the style of play where you're kind of just like turning off your brain and basically just trying to 1v4 people, I guess. And so yeah, that's why there was such a big difference between Arlington and London.
Interesting. Yeah, we had Formal and Bound on the podcast recently, and they alluded to some potential GAs for HCS London. Obviously, we didn't see any of that, but I think there's a common theme across the HCS player pool of professional players that just think that there's a little too much cheese in the game. Shotgun, Heatwave being a big part of that. What happened with those GA discussions going into London? And is there something that the pros might take into their own hands to improve the sandbox as it relates currently in HCS play?
Yeah, I think for the most part, the pros are kind of fed up with any sort of shotguns, bulldogs and Heatwaves included. And I think pretty much everybody is down to kind of, finally hang those up and leave that for the birds. But we discussed it a good amount. I'm actually surprised it didn't get GA'd going into London, maybe because it was so soon when we were talking about it.
Yeah.
I'd say maybe by next event, we probably won't end up using that. But we're definitely going to have more discussions, as a group going forward. Because yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a lot that we really don't agree with, and there's HES isn't really helping out with that. But I mean, yeah, hopefully we can make some strides in the right direction and make this game as competitive as it possibly can be. Which, as a competitor, that's what I strive for. I'm sure everybody that also plays the game and like my peers are trying to strive for the same thing.
Everybody wants the game to be a little bit more balanced. You could argue maybe the lower seeded teams have a reason to like it to be a little bit more random. I don't know. There's something interesting there about their vote. But back to London, you guys had nearly a flawless bracket going into grand finals with a record of 9-1, 3-0ing Optic, and a matchup that always feels destined to go to Game 5, and then 3-0ing Rebellion, who had just taken you to a Game 5 in Arlington. To me, this showed that you guys had leveled up your game from the previous LAN. Which series had you feeling like you were, I guess, quote unquote, back? Was it when you guys defeated Optic or Rebellion, and why?
I feel like the way our team works, even though pool play matches and even sometimes winners round one matches aren't super important, I feel like we still try to take those pretty seriously as to, I guess, like gauge how we're playing for the event and see where our headspace is at so we can kind of adjust. I guess the biggest series for us was definitely the Shopify series, just because of how well we played during that series. It really got our confidence up, and like we knew we were clicking and we were on the same page, and we knew we kind of just needed to keep our foot on the gas pedal with that, moving forward with the rest of the tournament. But honestly, every series before that even felt really good as well.
It was in that Rebellion series that I believe it was on the main stage, and that was the big topic of conversation for a lot of people at London, was the main stage. I remember at one point, I think you got a double kill. You had that patented dead, and it literally shook the camera. So this was energy that you could not only feel, but you could see it as well. What were your thoughts on the main stage, and what would you do to perfect the HCS main stage in your eyes?
I mean, honestly, this main stage, it was really cool. To be honest, like it was something that was pretty unique. I mean, I guess unique compared to the events that we normally have, but back in the day we used to have setups like that where we're playing right in front of our opponents. I'd say I'm not really against it. I know a lot of people really loved it and think we should move towards that direction. Me personally, I enjoyed the normal main stage setup, but I can see why as a spectator, it was probably more entertaining. I didn't really have anything against it, so if they had another tournament like that, like I'm cool with it.
It was just from a previous conversation we had with Boo Boo Dubu. He said because you guys were so close on the main stage, you couldn't necessarily hear through the white noise, but if you yelled out a dead that was so loud, the other team could hear it. Were you trying to increase the decibel volume on those dead callouts just to kind of instill a little bit more fear in the competition?
Yeah, I guess he's right with that. I wasn't doing that intentionally. It was just kind of the energy that was surrounding the event and how we were playing as a team. Honestly, I feel like when our team's clicking, I can be able to bring more energy, and that's just kind of how it happened naturally. But that is a good point, though. You can definitely hear whenever people started to get loud during the game or even after. So.
After a grand finals win against Optic, the target is firmly back on you guys. I mean, what's it going to take for you guys to stay on top? It feels like this is probably the most competitive, maybe partially because of what you said about the current meta, but it does feel like a lot of new teams are kind of nipping at the heels of the top three, Sentinels, Shopify Rebellion. What's it going to take for you guys to stay on top against all these teams that seem to be getting better?
Yeah, I'd say it's the same thing with us every single time, right? It's just practice. I feel like that's what sets us apart from teams, and that's just what we've been doing for years, right? Like our core trio has been together for so long, and we think the same way about the game, but also like how we should go about the game leading up to tournaments, right? We practice pretty much every day. We don't want to overdo it, but we definitely try to practice as much as possible. I feel like we really like to iron out game modes in certain situations to make sure that we're just always on the same page. I feel like that's the most important thing with us. I will say, like, going into next event, I don't think we're gonna do anything really different. Honestly, we're just gonna do the same old, same old. I think we're just gonna iron out more game modes. I feel like as a team, we were working together really well, but I will say we were not in final form whatsoever. I feel like performance-wise, it was pretty subpar, honestly. Like, there's so much that I mean, this is just how I'm looking at it. I'm like, there's so much that we got to work on in order for us to be like really in that final form. And I'm sure my teammates think the same way as well. But I do feel like competition's probably a lot closer than it's ever been before. And I do think that's a part of the meta and how the game is played now. I think like Shopify, for example, uh, they're a really good team, but with the way the game is played now, I feel like they play to the meta so well, right? Like the way they work as a team, the way they finesse their lives, and the way that their aggression that they have on the map, it really benefits the way that they play. So I do feel like right now that's like a huge reason as to why that gap is closing in, or at least like it seems that way.
Makes a lot of sense. I feel like SSG's playstyle is also really similar to Shopify, but you guys also just capable to adapt to whatever the meta kind of brings at you. And I think that really just goes to show you guys' work ethic. And like you said, it's just been forever. Like I feel like Snakebite I've always thought of as one of the hardest workers. Royal 2 seems like a jokester to a lot of people, but he's low key a really hard worker as well. I recall an interaction where I was with some friends and like Royal 2 walks up to us and it's like somebody invited him like, oh yeah, we're going to such and such bar after this. You want to come with? And he's like, nah, I got to go back to the hotel and do VOD review. And it's like, yeah. I respect that. It's like he's taking it every single event super seriously where like, I don't know, you can think of maybe people that make it to the top in a lot of different sports, but then they get comfortable and that can be sometimes the beginning of the end. So I think that's just like a tale for you guys' longevity as a team, just always working hard. And I got a lot of respect for that.
Let me ask Frosty. Everyone said third place at Arlington was a disappointment. I want to ask someone on the team. Is third place a disappointment in this highly contested, highly competitive meta? Is it a blessing in disguise? How did you ultimately feel about Arlington after all things were said and done with that third place finish?
Me personally, yeah, absolutely. Third place is a disappointment for me, and I know it is for my teammates as well. But I think we knew the way we were playing and the way our practice was heading into the event. It just wasn't there. I know that we could have won that event. It would have been a hard road, but we definitely could have won the event for sure. Getting third, it kind of made sense the way we were playing. But honestly, you need those downs sometimes to give you that extra little motivation and to kind of gauge yourself on like the things that you need to improve on.
So we've covered a lot of the recent history with another win in London. Let's trace it back to the very beginning. This is always some of my favorite parts of the podcast. How did you get into gaming and how did you come up with your gamer tag?
Let's see, like the beginning?
The very beginning. A little Frosty.
Let's see. I always grew up playing video games. My dad always had like a Super Nintendo. I know he grew up on a Super Nintendo, a Nintendo 64. So I mean, I was playing games way back when, probably when I was like, 3-4 years old. GoldenEye, I believe, was my first shooter. So I mean, I'm an OG at this point.
Same. Yep.
Yep. There you go.
How old are you?
I'm 26 now.
Okay. Wow.
So,
me and Eli are deep into our 30s. So, and
right.
GoldenEye was for a lot of us, our first game. So that's interesting. because you started off at an early age of 3 or 4, you were right there in the mix with us old dinosaurs in the Halo sense of things. So that's really interesting to hear. So big ups to Pops for it sounds like introducing you to gaming.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, it seems like I'm like kind of young, but I feel like I'm an old head now, at least to myself. But yeah, I've been around. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I've been playing since GoldenEye. I started with Halo CE when I was about 4 or 5 years old. So I started with the original. I grinded that game. I grinded Halo 2, grinded Halo 3. You know what I mean? I grew up on Halo, and that was just my game, pretty much forever.
I'm curious, what does it mean for a 4 or 5-year-old to grind Halo 1? Like, is there like a family member that you're like 1v1ing against constantly? Like, what are your memories of that time frame?
Yeah, so we didn't have an Xbox whenever it originally came out. I actually had a cousin who had an Xbox and had Halo CE, and I would go to their house a lot, and that was just something we would play, like a 4-man game, split screen, doing whatever in custom games, and like maybe some campaign here and there. And we liked it so much, my brother ended up getting his own Xbox, and then me and him would play at home, and we would either play like split screen or campaign together.
And was your gamer tag always Frosty, or was that something that you came up with down the line after a few years of hardcore split screen Halo CE action?
So yeah, definitely not. I've been through many gamer tags during my time. Throughout all of Halo 2, I actually didn't even have my own account. Whenever I would play Halo 2 online, it would just be my brother's account. So we would share the same consoles and the same account. So I could only play whenever he wasn't playing. I would wake up at like 5:30, 6 a.m. just to try to get like an hour of Halo 2 time in right before I went to school, just because like I was having so much fun with it. I remember like this stuck in my head all the time. Like I would watch montages back then all the time. Reed 18 was always like one of my favorite guys.
Yes.
And yeah, he's an OG. I'd be like, all right, I need to get a kill tag like before I go to school today. You know what I mean? I would set like small goals like that, and it was so fun. I would play Rumble Pit. I would play honestly just everything I could. I would say whenever Halo 3 came out, I had a bunch of different gamer tags. I honestly can't remember any of them besides one. I did go by Sneaky Pickle, and I will say to this day that's like that would be like such a great name because it's so troll. But like, imagine if it was serious and I'm like a world champion and my name's just Sneaky Pickle.
That's a god to your name. Why not go back to it?
I know, honestly, I should.
That was my thought process in 2001, making my Xbox Live gamer tag. I was like, all right, I want someone to join the lobby and be like, this dude sucks. So when I was watching Dexter's Laboratory, I heard Old Man Mikowski get shouted across the screen, and I was like, oh my god, dude, no one's gonna suspect Old Man Mikowski to be able to hit a shot in this lobby. So
exactly,
that's how I came up with my gamer tag. I was 11 then and going on 34 now, and had it ever since. Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned how almost like what's in a name, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm sure you didn't want that to be your name going into actual Halo Pro competition. When was it that you ultimately decided upon Frosty?
I would say towards the end of Halo 3 going into Halo Reach. So I think by the time Halo Reach actually came out, it was the gamer tag I use now. It's so Frosty.
I come from the time period, I mean, Halo 2 competing and then Halo 3 competing with the original Frosty, aka Georgie Porgy. And when we spoke with Boo Boo, he mentioned that there was a team of him, you, and George. So Frosty and Frosty on the same team. How did that team come about? And did you know George before you made your tag?
So I'd say when I made my tag, no, I don't think I knew there was another Frosty pro player or like during the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, that was actually a really cool story. Me and Jesse, we always like kind of knew of each other. Like we played a decent amount whenever we were like, 13, 14. But yeah, me, Boo Boo Doo Boo, and then the OG Frosty. Yeah, we were grinding played some online tournaments. That was always a really fun squad. It was really cool kind of grinding with him and, picking his brain at such a young age, because I feel like he plays a very fundamental style of Halo, which always stuck out to me.
And when was it that you ultimately found MLG and competitive Halo? Was it through this roster that you're speaking of right now?
No, I knew about MLG back in Halo 2. Basically, every time there was a tournament, I would always be watching, and I was always super interested. I just knew I was never able to make it out to an event, just because I think just probably like financial reasons, and on top of that, I don't think I was probably way too young at the time for my parents to be like, "Oh, yeah, you can go on this flight to the East Coast by yourself. Like, no one's watching over you. Like, that's all right."
Yeah, I think your first LAN was it with the Suddaths in 2015 Gamers for Giving, or no, you went to St. Louis before that with Rabid, King Avalon, and I don't know how to say this guy's name, Trick Pony.
Oh yeah, one funny. Yeah.
One Trick Pony. Okay. What's the story with your very first LAN? How'd you convince your parents, and how old were you?
I was 17 at the time. Yeah, so I've always wanted to go to an event. Again, I just like financially, I just wasn't able to make it. Rabbit at the time, he was just someone I played with in matchmaking, and I talked to him in like Twitch chat, right? For those of you guys who know him, he's just a troll. Like he's not a real human being. Yeah, I don't know how I got to become friends with this guy, but he took me under his wing basically. Like he knew I was really solid, and he's like, "Hey, I want to like team with you at this event. I'll pay for your hotel. I'll pay for your flight." And I was like, "All right, that's fine with me." I think he spoke to my mom on the phone or something like that, just to be like, "Hey, like everything's all gonna be good. Like we're gonna be at here. Like we're just gonna be at this event this whole time." My parents were kind of skeptical of it at first, but after a couple times, I felt like it was pretty normal. But yeah, that's how I got to go to my first event.
During this time, who were some of your earliest inspirations on the Halo side? You mentioned Reed 18. Were there more montages that you like to watch or took influence from, or was it mostly professional players at that time that caught your eye and early inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, I loved any and all montages, honestly. Whatever content I can get back then, I was watching it. Obviously, I loved watching Ola. I'd say my favorite pro player back in the day was Lunchbox, which is very surprising, I feel like, considering like the way I play the game. But I mean, I always loved people who basically like play less is more. I feel like he can do so much for his team, and it doesn't really seem like he's doing anything. But if you really understand the game of Halo, he's helping his team out in ways that you can't even see on screen as far as like the stats go. And that was something that I always like to watch. Or that's something I always looked for in players. Same with like Hines, that sort of like support role. I always liked watching those types of players.
Yeah, those type of players just don't shine on the stat page, but just make the game easier to win, like without even realizing it. They're controlling spawns or like just getting little bits of extra damage that make all the difference in team fights. I think like nowadays you kind of have shifted into more of that kind of play style. Like whenever we do listen-ins, it sounds like you're IGLing for the squad. I don't know. It feels like when I watch your screen, you find yourself in the right place at the right time in a very intentional manner. Would you say that maybe you've matured into that kind of role on this squad?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, I feel like whenever I came onto the scene, I was this young gun player, and we have like a running joke with our team where like my birthday's coming up, and my teammates are like, "Oh, how old are you?" And like I'll say my age, right? Like I just turned 26, and Royalty would be like, "Dude, what?" Like I swear you were like 5 years younger than me, but he's only a year older than me.
Wow.
So like
That is a little
I
trippy.
was like no, 100%. I was like the young gun, but I feel like I'm at the age basically where like I don't know. I feel like I'm a veteran player in terms of how I look at the game and how I play the game. I feel like that's just something you kind of do over the course of your career. You kind of adapt and figure out ways to play the game rather than just not missing a bullet. But yeah, I'd say whenever we picked up Renegade, I just took a step back. I would say just because I mean John is John, right? He can just do whatever he wants on the map, and he can pick up so much of that slaying, which used to be my role before. So now I can slay, but I can also, push up on the map, like anchor more positions and, kind of help my teammates do what they need to do on the map, which I'm perfectly fine with doing. I feel like my role kind of switched, honestly, whenever I made that transition to COD. I mean, for those who kept up with that, I kind of played a similar role with that. Whenever we were having our success in COD, my stats were not great at all. Like, I don't think I was like this superstar player and, dominating the map. I was just kind of directing people, stepping up communication wise and being that support role that my teammates needed.
Yeah, coming up on 10 years, or I should say in year 10 of your Halo career, you're absolutely a veteran at this point. It looked like you had a great start to your career, a couple of top 32s, but outside of that, you were averaging what looks like a top 8 placement. That's incredible. What was your biggest takeaway after you won your first LAN in your rookie year? Was that your first win on LAN, the Iron Game Daytona 2015? You guys were actually called Daytona as a team name.
I remember the first time I got to watch you play, and it was at that Daytona tournament where I decided to coach you in the finals, and it was something I'll never forget. I mean, I could tell you had the special it factor from day one.
What was that like, getting your first win on LAN in what looked like your rookie year?
Yeah, that one was pretty cool. I don't know. For me, like the way I look at tournaments is like, if it's not a super serious one, then I don't know, it doesn't really count in my eyes. I'm pretty sure Halo 5 had just released. I don't know the exact date on that, but to me, I kind of looked at it as like a local tournament. I kind of knew I was gonna win before I went to the tournament, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Well, I mean, yeah, just because of the team that I had, and just because I was able to play the game like 2 weeks before or something like that. So most of the people who were showing up to the event, it was pretty much their first time playing the game. So I just had a huge advantage. Yeah, I mean, it was really fun, honestly. That was my first like big win, but I don't know. I didn't really think anything of it at the time, honestly.
You knew there was more on the table to be fought for at the very least.
Yeah.
But yeah, props to you for, I guess, admitting that you had an unfair advantage in some respects for the tournament. I mean, I feel like some players would leave that detail out, but
Yeah.
I know there was kind of a similar situation at the beginning of Halo 4.
Right.
Most players that we see come onto the scene have a bit of a learning curve, maybe start at top 32, climb their way to top 24, kind of slowly work their way up the ladder. But it seems like you were able to come out the gate swinging. What do you attribute the fast start to your career to?
I don't know. I'd say when I started competing, like actually going to live events, I was a pretty well-rounded player. I think my skill set was absolutely there, and I just needed the experience of actually playing. And I feel like the first couple of LAN events I went to, I was, I guess not surprising to myself, but I was really calm. Like I didn't feel any nerves at any tournament I was ever playing at. I just thought it was really fun. Like I just had a good time. I was like, oh, when's our next match? Like I want to play. Like, you know what I mean? Like I just want to sit down and play as much as possible at the LAN events, just because it's such a unique thing, right? Just like hundreds of people showing up to compete in a video game that we all love to play. I think whenever I initially started competing, I was as good as everyone that I was playing against already, if that makes sense. Like I was able to hang with all the pros that I matched up against.
It's a really interesting point to me, just as someone interested in psychology. I think a lot of players do, like when they're competing, have kind of a voice in their head that's like, I guess, pressuring them to do well, or like they're kind of self-assessing the whole time. Like, am I doing good? Am I doing bad? Maybe they're like holding the back button and looking at the scoreboard the whole time. And it's kind of distracting them from just being in the moment and playing their best. So for you to just say like, yeah, I was just having fun and playing the game, that probably means you're more present, I think, than most players. And I noticed that when I watch your screen too. Like, it doesn't feel like you care what your stats are ever. Like you're just doing what makes sense in the moment that gives you the best chance to win. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, 100%. I would agree with that for sure.
Moving along in the timeline just a little bit further after Halo 5's release in 2015, late 2015, I want to say. It was January 31st, 2016, when one of the greatest rosters in Halo history would form. Lethal, Snakebite, Royal 2, and of course Frosty on that CLG roster at X Games Aspen. And I just remember, this was shortly after I got out of competing, and I'm like, oh my god, these guys get to go to X Games? Like, this is so unfair.
And somehow Frosty has been able to just completely escape. Has Railgun out, kills Lunchbox, looking for the double kill on Snipe Down. Will he be able to get it? Doesn't matter. Lethal there for the support. And look at that score. What was at one point a dominating Evil Genius's lead has now become a very fragile one at that. And more importantly, CLG reducing it by the second.
CLG showing that they can hold full setups too, and just as dominant as EG, as you see, a 3-second game right now.
Beating for Frosty to try and pick up another kill, but unfortunately couldn't charge the Railgun quick enough. And look how aggressive Frosty's being, desperately trying to hunt down Snipe Down there as he does pick up that kill. They're being so aggressive towards you. You have to question,
strategy.
are they potentially worried here about flipping the spawn?
You guys ultimately competed alongside the best action sports athletes in the world. You guys got a silver medal at that competition, but those are awards that were once reserved for guys like Travis Pastrana, Tony Hawk. I mean, the massive cultural icons. This felt like a massive cultural shift in people's perception around competitive gaming at the time. Did it feel like that to you as a competitor, or in the moment, is it a little bit harder to appreciate things like that when you're in the thick of it?
I'd say in the moment it's definitely hard to appreciate for sure. I mean, I like kind of understood what was going on in the moment, but yeah, I actually looking back at it, that is a huge jump to be like, hey, video games are now being played at X Games. You know what I mean? I feel like that's such a huge accomplishment. But yeah, during the time, absolutely not. Like we're kind of just like, hey, we're here for another tournament. Like,
When do I play again?
yeah, exactly.
Yes, they need to use that overshield as some sort of bait by pushing top center, soaking up some damage, and eventually getting control, because they just can't sit back and go for kill for kill. It looks like CLG is playing passive. They had the weapons, they had the power-ups, and look at this. Snakebite running away,
huge
eventually taken
mistake.
down. Sniped down in the EG squad, smell blood as they have 49 kills.
And Frosty's gonna get killed as well by Snipe Down. Here's the new combo.
Well, after a second place finish, you guys ended up running off a string of victories, winning 2 back-to-back Halo World Championships. A lot of Dynasty talk got brought up in the offseason or even previous season between you and Optic. Optic, if they won 2 in a row, would it be a Dynasty? Looking back at your Optic roster, that CLG roster as well, do you guys see that as a Dynasty? And what was it like winning $1 million all because of Halo?
As far as like the dynasty talk goes, I feel like everybody just has their own opinions on it. The consensus now is like our team was a dynasty or is a dynasty, whatever you want to call it. To me, like I don't know, just everyone has their own opinions. It's whatever you want to call it. But yeah, the first world championship ever. The prize pool was what, $2.5 million in 2016. Yeah. Just absolutely insane. I never thought, I mean, Halo would ever be competing for that much money, and especially that being like my first breakout year, being able to have the opportunity to compete for a bigger portion of that prize was insane to me during that time.
What would you say is the key to winning back-to-back world championships? I mean, that team was so consistent. Obviously, you didn't win every single tournament, but seemed like the vast majority of them. And then obviously winning 2 of the ones that mattered most. Was there any particular key to that success? And what will it take to win another one?
I think it's just the ongoing thing that me and my teammates have. It's just like our outlook on the game and how we want to approach, improving together, right? We don't see the game exactly the same, which is okay, and we know that. We just know how we want to work on improving together as a team. I feel like, again, we practice pretty much every day. We go over the things that we need to go over, and then we have discussions on the things that we need to see eye to eye on. And there's absolutely disagreements. We've had arguments over the course of the years for sure, but I feel like the biggest thing with us is like we just got to come together as a team at some point, and we know eventually that we are going to do that. So I feel like that's where a big part of our success comes into play, is like those first 2 years of Halo 5. Well, I mean, I guess all 3 years, right? It's like we just have the same mindset day in and day out, and it doesn't really change from that. And I'd still say to this day, it's very similar.
This is a question I've had on my mind for 6 years. I've wanted to ask you, Frosty. Going into the 2018 Halo World Championship, your team is looking at an unprecedented three-peat, but just 1 week before the tournament, Optic Gaming drops the roster. And I have a unique perspective on this because I was the director of first-person shooters for Optic Gaming's Academy program at the time. I remember being on staff, and when that started to get through the grapevine, everyone was absolutely shocked. I imagine you guys probably were as well. As much as you can share about that very intimate and personal time in your career, what was the reasoning behind that? Was it just simply contracts and the timing of when those contracts began and end, or what was the ultimate reason why Optic let you guys go?
Honestly, it's kind of a blur at this point. I just remember Optic at the time. They weren't really Optic. They were ran by a different company, and that company was kind of Just fumbling the bag, I guess you could say. Yeah, mainly had to do with contracts. We just couldn't come to an agreement, basically. But I'd say the biggest thing with that is it wasn't like an over the night or overnight type of deal. It was something I was ongoing for a couple weeks. So, I mean, as a player, with how much time and dedication we're putting into the game, while we're dealing with that, something like that on the side, it definitely made it hard to, really put our focus into, actually playing the game. So it was just like an annoying thing to have to really go through during that time.
Do you think that spilled over into the Halo World Championship? A little bit of that kind of like grenade going off in your ear feeling, I'm sure you guys felt?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, that's not a reason why we lost or anything like that. Like, absolutely no excuses, winning or losing a tournament. But, yeah, it was definitely something that you just don't want to be hassled with, I guess you could say, while you're trying to, put in the hours day in and day out. But at the same time, too, though, like, it was really cool during that time to be able to represent the Tox brand.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like a nice segue.
Yeah, y'all famously formed that Tox organization. And what was that like? You guys were now, I assume, entirely independent. Were you guys running that as an organization just by yourselves as players? Did you guys have a GM or any type of management roles behind you guys? And I remember you guys had a ton of support. People knew what you went through with Optic letting you guys go. And there were even a lot of Optic fans that supported you guys. Talk us through what it was like to create your own org.
Yeah, it was definitely like bare bones, I would say. It wasn't definitely not as complex as running an actual org. But yeah, I guess we could say, or you could say that we were our own GMs. So we had sponsors and we had, people we were meeting with and things like that.
Royal 2 gets a triple kill off screen, checks his email. He's,
Yeah.
I got an email from Doritos. Let's go,
No,
guys.
No, yeah, literally. I forgot what our sponsors were, but I swear, like at Worlds, we were partnered with like Red Bull or something like that, which was really cool. It was like pretty surreal, I guess you could say, to be able to like bring in our own brand deals just from us being a team.
It kind of reminds me of like the music industry, right? Like some of these music industry people, they get contracts with like a record label or whatever, but ultimately the record label kind of just takes advantage of the artist, but then the artist wises up and is like, you know what, let me just make my own record label. Like I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure Eminem did that, right? Like he just has Slim Shady Records now and it's just him. And it's like, yeah, I'm just going to get all the profit, which like
Yeah.
totally makes sense. Why would you need anybody else if you're on top? So
Cut out the middleman.
yeah, exactly. Like props to you guys for figuring that out early and making the best of it. I want to talk a little bit about the competition during this time. During this era, you guys formed what I guess us old school heads would call like a final boss versus Carbon type of rivalry with Splice, where they were finally able to take obviously that world championship off of you guys. In your eyes, what was it about that Splice roster that gave you guys so much trouble?
Whenever that team had formed, everyone kind of knew they were going to do some damage. I feel like our team knew we were going to be able to compete with them. They worked so well together, and by the third year of Halo 5, the way the four of them played together as a team was just very efficient, and you see that pretty similarly with how SSG play now in Halo Infinite, right? I just think they have they do such a good job of kind of containing the other team and kind of keep the enemies on their toes, just like constantly taking fights or finessing their lives and being a hard death on the map. And that's something that no other team really did over the course of Halo 5 in the first 2 years. And that was something they did really well in year 3. And I feel like that definitely put us on the back foot a lot whenever we did play them, which is why they saw so much success whenever we did play each other.
I feel like it takes kind of a champion mentality to just recognize what your opponent's doing good, maybe even learning from it and trying to adapt to it. You've got to be keeping tabs on them. So props to you for that. Taking a look at the wiki, I kind of wanted to shift the conversation away from playing into coaching, because not only did you guys have like one of the most consistent rosters of all time with Halo, but also you've had, I guess you started with Clutch for that first year in 2016, but ever since then, Royal 2's brother, Royal 1, has been your coach. Whenever we go to listen-ins with your team, seems to be an amazing hype man for your roster, infusing energy into the comms when you guys are popping off. How much do you think a coach matters in a game like Halo Infinite, and how big of an impact has Royal One made for your team?
Coaches are super important regarding Halo, just because they're able to be on stage with you, right? They're a fifth voice while you're playing, and I feel like that alone just makes a huge difference.
Yo, listen, they're gonna 3-2-1 Chow, okay? Play a spot where you can hide. Jiggle spots.
Yeah,
Trying to
I
take me
kind of want to walk up on Shrouds.
if someone wants to make a
got
play,
it.
John's walking up.
No, in front of you. We can.
Go.
I feel like Chris is, in my opinion, the best coach in Halo, but I mean, obviously, everybody has their own opinions. I just think he has a really good understanding of the game. He knows the fundamentals to a T. I mean, he's coached us for years, and then even before I joined the team, I believe he was coaching them in H2A as well. But yeah, I mean, he just knows how to play the game at a high level, and that's something that is hard to get the respect of like being a coach, and that's something we all have for him is respect and just hearing him out on certain things that we're doing wrong in game. And then on top of that, obviously, it's just like, you know, timing the weapons, making sure we're on the same page in certain moments, and kind of speaking up on things that we're kind of lacking in the moment.
I love listening to those listen-ins with you guys, man. I feel like he just fires you guys up. He's like, nice. Like you can hear him from like across the whole stage. You could be in the audience and you're hearing him pump you guys up. I just love to hear that stuff.
Yeah, my favorite Royal One memory was we were doing a listen in. I think this was actually on LAN at one point. And this is when you guys picked up Renegade, and Renegade fires a rocket launcher, and Royal One goes, "Nice fucking shot, John!" And it's like the easiest. Like the dude walked out of Spiker steps when rockets were still there, I think, and got the easiest kill I've ever seen. But I think Royal One sensed that you guys were feeling it. You guys were starting to build a little bit of momentum, and whether or not that shot took any level of skill, he just wanted to feed into the energy. And yeah, he's a true fifth in every sense of the word. Moving forward a little bit now into the Halo Infinite era, you guys regrouped with Lethal, took first place at Kansas City after a little bit of a tough start. It looked like Cloud9 was about to run away with it season 1. But after you guys fell short of your goals at the Halo World Championship, placing 6th, did you guys feel like you hit a ceiling there? What went into the decision to split from Lethal? I am sure that had to be a difficult decision after all the success and time that you had together as a group. But why ultimately did you guys decide to split from Lethal?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a tough decision. I mean, of course, like I love TJ. I'm sure. I mean, I can't speak for my other teammates, but I'm sure they do as well. We all think he's a great player, and you know, and as a person, we're all really good friends with him. I think for us to be able to make that decision as a team, it would take a lot, right? And I feel like that's the big reason why it took so long for us to make that decision.
Yeah.
And we felt like there was only, honestly, like one person that we could have replaced him for, and that was the person that we were trying to get. So whenever there was an opportunity for us to be able to get a player like Renegade, and especially with how we were performing during the year and kind of gauging where we were with the competition, I felt like it just felt like the right time to do it.
We saw that with SSG, similar story. They said that there was only one person in the world that they would drop Penguin, now Dead Zone, for, and that was Legend. So I'm just curious your take on that. I mean, there's so many different storylines. Everybody wants to talk about who's the quote unquote best player in the game. Is that something that you even care about at this point? Or do you kind of feel like it's just a team game? So like, what's the point of talking about who's the best player in the game?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously it's nice if you're in that conversation, but I mean, me personally, no, I've never cared about that. Even in Halo 5, like I was considered the best player, but like the way we look at quote unquote the best player now is completely different than how we looked at it back then. Like if you go back and look at any tournament I played in Halo 5, right? I don't think there was a single tournament where I had the number 1 KD at the event. Or even maybe even like top 3 or something like that. You know what I mean? And I feel like nowadays it's like, oh, he's the best player right now, and it's because he has the highest KD, or he's like top 2. I feel like now people are just looking so heavily into the stats, which I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, what else are you going to gauge on it? But yeah, I feel like every other event there's a new best player, which is, I mean, again, it's all right. I mean, that's just my opinions on it. Like, everybody can talk about it however they want. Me personally, I just think that it's just kind of difficult to gauge the best player when there's so many good players and there's not really something that separates those players as far as like stats goes or like
Yeah.
anything like that. So it's just something that's really hard to gauge, especially in a game like this.
Yeah, I entirely agree with that. I think if you were to look at Halo competition like an article, the stats would be the headline, but the actual body of the article, which reveals all of the context, is watching the event, watching the tournament, looking at what Eli and I call the eye test so often.
Yeah.
That's really the huge key. And Eli, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
Well, I was just gonna say, it kind of like just the way that people talk about it. It just kind of shows like human nature is having recency bias. Like as soon as SSG wins the tournament, now it's Stellar and Legend in the conversation. As soon as you guys win the tournament, now it's you and Renegade. And like I don't know, people are definitely flimsy with their opinions and maybe don't recognize how much recency bias has an impact. But also, it's important, like you said, to understand the context of like what. The way that I try to look at it is like, what's the total value added to a team from one player? And that's why I've said your name a couple times in the debate. Is like, well, he's IGL, he's right place, right time, he's dealing a shitload of damage and just doing whatever it takes to win the game. And I think that somebody that's doing that is definitely in the conversation. But at the same time, you could argue that for a lot of different players. So
yeah, absolutely,
probably a silly conversation at the end of the day.
Jumping ahead in the timeline a little bit, last year's Halo World Championship, where it's Optic looking at back-to-back World Championships. They're up 2-0 in the series. And you guys famously run off 8 wins in a row, becoming the first team in Halo history to not only reset the grand finals of Halo World Championship, but win it all. To the best of your recollection, put us back in that moment on the main stage. What memory sticks out to you the most?
I mean, starting off when we're down 0-2, right? I think we all just got up, went to the back, and started talking over. I think the biggest thing that we all needed to understand was in that moment, we knew what it was going to take to be able to win every single game, right? Like we know what our preparation was, and we know like how to win every single game. We just needed to make sure we're not overcomplicating the game and being on the same page with that. And I feel like us dropping those first 2 maps of the series was basically just that. I feel like I don't remember the exact score lines, but I feel like they were somewhat close and they were winnable games for us. But I feel like we made a couple plays where it's like, oh, probably shouldn't have done that. Like that's not something we normally would do in that moment. And if we just cut out those mistakes, we knew we were just gonna get it rolling. And I feel like once we grouped up and kind of just like talked about it, took a little breather. As soon as we sat back down on that stage, I think we were just ready to go from there.
Yeah, I think I famously said, because that was Makowski and I's first time casting grand finals together. I mean, they had the main broadcast with, I think, Bravo and Onset, but we at LVT had our secondary broadcast just casting the same thing. And I was like, man, when these guys start winning, they don't really stop winning. Like they just kind of hit a different gear. And I think I said that just after the first game that you guys won. And then sure enough, you guys did not stop winning. I mean, you guys just kind of kicked it into a different gear that, like you said, from your preparation, you knew you could hit. The one that sticks out to the most to me was the strongholds on Solitude, which is no longer a game type.
RIP.
Yeah, just put Optic in the blender, just controlling spawns perfectly throughout that game. What's your thoughts on like the current map pool? Is there any game type that you'd like to see come back? Are there any game types that you'd like to see go away? What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like it's a really good question. Well, first off, I think I would be fine with Positive Strongholds to be in the current map pool. Maybe given some changes, like maybe take off camo, top mid, or something like that. I feel like that would do loads to the map. But me personally, I would have liked it still in the map pool. I don't really have an issue with the maps right now. If anything, just maybe switch out a couple of things on the maps, like Aquarius, for example. I don't think Overshield should be P1. Maybe move it to like bottom mid or top mid. Just small things like that, I feel like would do loads for the flow of the map and the overall spectator point of view. I might have like a weird take on it, but like I'm fine with playing the same maps over and over again for years, right? Like I feel like that's the Halo staple, right? Like we always play Sanctuary, we always play Pit. You know what I mean? Like we always play the same maps, and then even looking at games like Valorant or CS2 now, it's like they're playing the same exact maps. Like they're playing Dust 2. Like when did that map come out? Like 2003 or something? Like
Yeah, before that, I think.
yeah, like that map's been around forever. I mean, I get why people are complaining about the staleness of watching the same maps and modes over and over again. The game is supposed to speak for itself, and I feel like if the game is solid and the settings are solid, then you don't need to keep on changing the maps and the modes. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. I don't know.
Have you had a chance to look at the two new maps, Origin, which is obviously just Coliseum from Halo 5, and Fortress? And if you have, how do you feel about the new maps that are coming?
I actually have it. I mean, Coliseum, obviously, I could have a good guess on what we're getting to the map pool. The other map, I don't know much about it. I just know it's like a CTF like double sniper map, which is like okay. To me, I feel like, I mean, what do we have? 3 CTF maps already? I feel like adding 2 more is like kind of weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like if they want to add stuff in, that's all right. Whenever Forbidden got added to the rotation, I was like, okay, like this map's solid, I guess. Like, might as well play it. But I feel like we have so many maps and modes that, like, again, I'm not really looking forward to even more things getting added, just because we already have so many maps and modes that I don't know. I just like I get the excitement again from a spectator point of view, but as a player, like that's where it becomes stale for me. Is like, oh, I have to go out and learn another map like mid-season. I have to grind it out and learn all these spawns and learn all these different situations on a map that like may or may not be terrible. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, absolutely understand that sentiment. Real quick, I want to go back to the Halo World Championship last year and ask you one more question about that. As you guys are down 0-2, you guys win 8 in a row. Which of those 8 in a row made you guys feel like, all right, we're back and we got this?
What really sealed the deal was, I believe it was the second series, and I think we played Aquarius Slayer, and we won that 50-49, I believe. I'm pretty positive, like 99% sure. But as soon as we won that Slayer, we're like, in my head, I'm like, okay, this is sealed. It's a done deal.
Was that one of the Aqua Slayers that went to overtime? I remember there was 2 like back to back. I think you guys in the losers finals against SSG also had a game that was like tied 44-44 when the clock expired. I mean, what's your take on the way that some of these tournament Slayers play out?
Yeah, I mean, it's just something that like it's an ongoing thing with us. It's like we want to scrim Slayers online, obviously, to get as much practice as possible, but they just do not play the same at all whenever it gets to the actual tournament. But that's something we know going into it, right? Like teams play more reserved, teams play less risky and more, I guess, together, you could say. But yeah, Aquarius going into overtime, I feel like it's pretty unheard of, like given how small the map is.
Happened twice, back-to-back series, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yep.
All right, so we have loaded up here. We're going to react live with Frosty to what we would say were the 2 most pivotal moments from your Halo World Championship achievement. First, we're going to the lower finals, I believe it was. SSG versus FaZe. Insane Game 5 says the title. Eli, let it rip.
Bound 2 inches from his monitor, of course.
Down to the wire as we go to the last 43
Classic.
seconds here. Both teams only needing 2 kills.
48 all. 40 seconds left. It looks like these 2 teams might be playing for OT, but with every inch that Frosty pushes up forward on the map.
Were you guys thinking to play for OT there? What was your thought process when you guys were down to the nitty-gritty? Clock is winding down. Do you take the risk and go for the win, or do you play for OT? What was your thought in this moment?
I will say, because of the score and the way we were set up on the map, like if we can take the risk, take it. But I feel like we have such a good setup on the map where everyone's kind of playing for themselves that we didn't really need to, right? Like,
yeah,
clock is almost like a non-factor to where like we don't really have to worry about it as far as influencing our play. I feel like, I mean, we just kind of saw me over to the left. I'm in the closet area, just kind of by myself. This was actually like a super setup play. I was like in my head, like I saw the score and I'm like, okay, if they decide to push me, like I was doing the math in my head too, right? I'm like, all right, if one guy pushes me, like that's a kill for us. If two guys pushes me, we get both those kills. If their whole team pushes me, then like I die, but then my teammates can push up on the map and like they have them trapped on that side of the map. So this whole time I'm like, all right, PJ, I need you to watch over me. Like PJ, you looking over me? He's like, yeah. And then I'm like, PJ, do not die for me, okay? I was like, I need you to play a safe spot, but like still watch over me. So like this whole time, like you can see him kind of like rustling around P2, but eventually like he puts himself in a good spot to be able to like watch that angle of P-Door, and that's kind of what was going on, at least in my mind.
Yeah, no, that's so cool to hear your thought process on that, because I think in the commentary here in the next couple seconds, we're mentioning like, I don't know, this feels like it's destined for OT, but oh, look at Frosty. He's thinking of making a move there. So really cool to get your perspective on that. Appreciate it.
It's going to be that risk reward you're playing with here. Do you play for the
Also, I want to point out Renegade has
Play for the
19
extra
deaths.
kill
I
to
feel like
win
that
this
is
game.
insane.
SSG
Wow.
too scared to even grab that thrust pack. They're scared that there might be a player baiting it from the opposite side of bottom middle. Little do they know they could probably just grab it for free if they wanted to. Looks like both teams totally fine with the timer expiring. Oh, or they're going to force a kill here.
Oh, here we go. The press is on. The push is on. SSG have made their decision, and they're going to stick with it, and they're going to get the win because of it. Oh, FaZe tie it with 0-0-0 on the board. OT is on board, but only one kill needed for each of these two teams. 49-0 and a Hail Mary grenade from Cross Map Royal 2 is enough to win game 2. FaZe go up 2-0 in the series, and Eli, I can't imagine how SSG feels right now.
It's so insane because we later I was gonna just say like we later because Brandon at LVT is goated production. He finds the end, and then he had to play it frame by frame as the 49s got tied. You guys literally it was 0-0-0 on the clock. You can't see the like thousandths of a second on the timer, but it was like literally frames before it struck 0 that you guys got the 49th kill to tie it up and activate overtime. I mean, what was it like in the moment? Like, there's just so much to process all at once.
Yeah, again, like the clock is something that we were paying attention to, but to get the kill in the final, 10th of a second or whatever, it's not something that like we had as a set plan. It's just kind of like luck of the draw. But yeah, it like we knew our chances were pretty good in that moment. Like honestly, we were probably thinking we were gonna get a kill even before that, but.
It goes to 0-0-0. Visually, it looks like it's over, but the game still counts on the clock for a full
There's
second.
still a full second
Correct.
between 0-0 and the end of 0-0. It's always rounded down.
I mean, I can't think of a more insane like scenario that could possibly take place for more drama at the very end of a game.
What if I told you it did moments later, literally the next series? You guys already talked about your nerves, steely nerves in these moments. I almost wonder if that previous 0-0-0 on the clock end game scenario warmed you up for this in the grand finals. Here you go. You guys have reset the bracket against Optic. A series tie here 1-1 for Optic means, okay, we can take a deep breath now. Like, we're back in this, but you guys steal it. Let's watch this moment from the Halo World Championship and get Frost's reaction to it.
Overtime activation. If the score is tied when the time expires, then it activates an extra 3 minutes on the game clock. We saw it once today already with just a millisecond left in the match. Could be pacing towards a similar situation.
Unbelievable. FaZe were previously up by a 2-possession lead just moments ago. Now it's Optic up 1. Lucid looking to make it 2, but oh, the windmill comes through, and Lucid goes down. Renegade with a huge win. 44 all, 15 seconds left, and a huge slay there on Renegade. If FaZe can just hold strong, hold defensively here, they'll win game 2. 10 seconds left to go. Renegade pushing through. He senses that because that player's weak, it's APG, and that should do it. 46 all. Optic win in the final second. What? And they steal it. No, we're going to OT. How is it possible that 2 Aquarius Slayers come down to the final?
So he's
nanosecond?
APG.
We're in sudden death. Optic needs 2. FaZe needs 3.
All right, so Optic needs 2, FaZe needs 3. Optic have the crowd support. You can hear in the audio, let's go Optic. You guys are still down. How do you guys come back from this? And I think I even saw APG famously put down his controller once again. He thought the game was over. Did you?
Yeah, it's so hard to in the moment like know exactly what's going on. That like I just knew the game was still going on. I wasn't able to process the fact that like we had tied it up and they had got their kill, after the OT had started. So I mean, the fact that we were still in the game, I think just from my perspective, I'm like, okay, like we're still good. Like we got a chance.
And how did you guys flip this where you were down 1, but you end up winning 50-49 ultimately? Talk us through from memory what that was like and what that entailed.
Yeah, so from what I remember, we're all trapped in blue base here, pretty much, and Optic kind of have us contained pretty well, I would say. Like, I'm pretty sure they're all over pink. Joey's obviously here at car, someone's behind him, and I feel like we've been through this scenario so many times leading up to this event. So I remember from my perspective, we didn't want to just like sit in the base and lose, basically, right? So we all wanted to make a play. I know John was like, "Yo, I'm trying to push car or something," and then I was like, "I'm down," and so in order to get from your flag into engine, right? If you're trapped and the other team has the entire map, you can't just walk into engine, right? So I remember in my head, I was like, "Okay, I'm down to go car." So I went shrooms, and in order to like actually get out of the base, you have to walk out shrooms and then shoot P, because that's just how the meta developed. And I remember I was like, all right, bet. Like, I've been through this moment so many times. Like, I know exactly what to do. So I remember that I did that. We ended up triple hitting car, and we all kind of just grouped up. And I think some like crazy battle happens when we're all basically like on the shock spawn. And John's finessing. He's getting like 4 nades thrown at him. And then me and PJ are both like jiggle peeking right next to each other, car 1. And then, I mean, the rest is history.
Chris! PJ, you're the fucking best, PJ. PJ, you're the greatest, bro.
You think the smirk of a 2023 world champion, like, dare I say.
A little smirk on his face. He said, "What? Did that really just happen?" Good job, guys.
The look on that man's face, you're not seeing it on the face of Optic Gaming, but that's what they're feeling internally right now. I cannot believe what we just witnessed. Eli, we talked about the nanosecond finish on the previous Aqua Slayer. We thought that was the craziest game we've ever seen in our lifetime, but we got one better. How is it even possible? And how does Optic Gaming come back after losing now 6 in a row in the grand finals?
And you said this was the game that after you won this, you're like, okay, yeah, we got this. Like that was their best chance to take another game off of us, and we kind of stole it from them. I think from like an energy standpoint, that's a pretty fair assessment, because from Optic's perspective, to lose like a heartbreaking game and to be down 2-0 instead of tied 1-1 is such a big difference. And it's pretty hard energetically, I think, to come back from something like that. So, and you guys are just riding the momentum until the finish line. I remember the very last game, I think, was Recharge King of the Hill. And then at this last tournament in London, that was the last game that you played against Optic. It kind of like threw me back to that. I'm like, man, Optic got to be having some PTSD here. Like, do they just kind of bow out in second place at this point? Because I don't know. It was very similar. I don't know if I even have a question related to that, but just thought I'd point it out as pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, things do line up that way, right? It seems to happen like all the time, which is kind of like fate sometimes with the way the game types work out.
Fate and destiny, man, that was super cool to get your reactions and almost break down a second by second thought process in those 2 key pivotal moments where FaZe came out on top despite having no time left on the clock. I mean, I'll always remember that, Eli. Not only our first time casting together on LAN, but man, that was maybe our favorite moment collectively together. So thank you to Frosty and FaZe and company for providing that. And I also remember after this, didn't Optic take like a 10-minute break? They actually famously walked outside of the venue. Usually you walk into the restroom or out into the pro player area. You guys, I almost wonder if that delayed walk back to the main stage had you guys feeling even more confident. Like, oh, we're up 2-0. These guys are head casing outside. They left the venue. We got this shit. I mean, I'm kind of like hyping it up a little bit. Was that a little bit of what was going through y'all's comms and minds?
Honestly, we didn't really think much of it. We saw that they did group up and then leave, not towards the back, but literally outside the venue. I'm pretty sure they probably went to like I don't know, smoke or like get some sun or something like that. We knew that they were going to take a minute. So we're like, oh, okay, like we have more time to just kind of like talk things out. And that was, I mean, it worked for us. Like we were down for it, honestly.
I felt like it was fitting, Frosty, to ask you a montage question. You're seemingly the only montager left, the last montager standing in the Halo community. What drives you to still create?
Just growing up on montages, loving watching every montage that was out during that time. I feel like that's something I love doing even while I'm competing, right? I always love making like the craziest play possible. You know, every time I get to an event, I'm like, oh, like how many overkills can I get this tournament, right? So it's just something that it's not something I intentionally do. It just kind of works out that way naturally in my gameplay, but it's something that me personally, like I love about the game is just like being able to have those flashy moments and kind of having some flair in my gameplay. And I feel like that's something I've always done. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what keeps me going, I guess, like as far as collecting clips.
Yeah, you get an overkill on the main stage and you get casting on top of it. I remember that was like a meta shift in the montage rankings. When guys like Formal and Lethal could Straight Sick, all those guys had commentary over their clips, and I'm like, oh man, I'm out of my element, bro. I'm not doing that shit on main stage. I could do it online, but not on main stage. So I always thought that was a cool dynamic to have in your montage. That extra reverb echo added to Chris Puckett's voice on a nice triple or nice overkill. I'm sure you still feel the same today with guys like Bravo and Onset. But yeah, that's super cool to hear, man. I'm a big fan of yours as it relates to still creating montages. People always say that, you know, montages are a thing of the past, but I mean, done correctly and done right, you can still get a lot of views around it. And more than anything, it's just a great way to string the gap between competition, right? You get a montage out in between that, you kind of get a little hype going for the next event. So big ups to you, Frosty. I appreciate you continuing to still create, to still compete all these years later. As we set our sights towards the quick cues portion of the podcast, that'll do it for all of our long form questions. Appreciate Frosty and all of that epic insight.
Yep, likewise. Thank you, guys.
New here with the podcast, though, in the quick cues, is our Patreon supporters, which you guys can check out in the description below. Patreon is a great way to support the channel. It takes a lot of time to pre-show, during show, post-show. I mean, the amount of energy and effort that goes into this, it might be an hour-long podcast, but it takes 24 plus sometimes to put all of this together. So we do appreciate everybody that subscribes and supports us on Patreon. If you do subscribe or support us on Patreon, we're going to let you guys ask the first question of the quick cues section. So this comes from Yuppa. When did you first start to realize that you could become one of, if not the best player in Halo?
I would say whenever I first started competing, like again, I didn't really have like the bar set for me before I competed. Like I knew I was good, but in my head I never was like, holy shit, like I'm amazing. Like I'm way better than this guy, that guy. Like that didn't really matter to me. Like as far as the way I thought about myself, it was like I'm gonna get on every single day and try to improve as much as possible. And that was just a mindset I had. I was like, I don't care if I'm the best player. I don't care if I'm like even gonna become a pro player. Like I'm just gonna have fun and try to be the best player that I could be. Whenever I initially started competing and actually going to live events, I was like, oh, okay, I can actually like hang with these guys that have been competing for years and years.
Yeah, very cool. Again, I want to thank our Patreon supporters for asking that question. The next opportunity will be in the next episode. So make sure you guys start to ask your questions in the Patreon chat. We actually leak who's in the next episode over on Patreon. So if you guys want to keep all eyes on Tide the Leader, make sure to support us over there. All right, going into the rest of the quick cues, these can be answered with one word or as many words as you'd like. What's your fondest Halo memory?
Oh, geez. Honestly, it's so hard at this point. I guess like a good one would be Halo 2, the day of release. My dad sent me to school that day, dropped me off at elementary, and then obviously he knew that like me and my brother wanted to get Halo 2 and play it. But so yeah, that day he dropped me off, and then little did I know, he drove over to GameStop, waited in line at like 8 in the morning or whatever, picked me up an hour or two later from school, and then just let me play Halo 2. I was like, damn, okay. Like
W dad in the chat.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best dad
Oh,
story
man.
you might have heard. Yeah, that's amazing.
Moving forward, who's on your Halo Mount Rushmore?
My Mount Rushmore. Jeez. Let's see. Say Lunchbox. I would say Lethal. I think Lethal was kind of like my new gen favorite pro player. I loved watching him play. Who else? Shotzi 3. Oh, the fourth one's difficult. Fourth one is difficult. Hold on, let me give this a good think. It's tough because it's either between PJ or Matt. I guess I'll give it to Matt, but those would be my two options for that fourth spot.
It's really funny you say that because every time someone mentions one or the other, they're like, "Well, I can't. Can I put two in my top four? Because they're kind of one in the same." So
100%.
Where do you think Ogre 2 falls in on that list? Is he right on the outside looking in, or where do you think Ogre 2 ultimately falls on your top 25 list?
I mean, I always loved watching Tom. I feel like the final boss era was amazing to watch, and I loved whenever Instinct formed in Halo Reach, the God Squad. I thought that was so sick, and Tuger being on that team, it was some of the best like tournaments I would watch during that time.
What's a Halo hot take that might have you roasted over the coals for?
I mean, I'll be saying this till the day I die. Halo 5 is the best Halo of all time. It's so fun. There's nothing like it, and I still think to this day there's not a game like it. But not biased, of course, at all. Just an incredible game competitively.
Wait, what's that? The roar from Las Vegas all the way to Dallas, Texas. Is that Tools? Can I hear it? Oh my God, Tools just lost his shit over that comment from Frosty. You know, he's standing up, probably got the foam finger on, Halo 5 logo on it because he's a big Halo 5 fan. Love to see that.
Sorry, before you get into the next one, talking about Tools.
Yeah.
Tools recently shared with me a clip from, I guess you were playing against him in like Coliseum Flag in Halo 5. I couldn't tell you when the time period was, but he's got it saved on his PC because it's such like a happy thing for him. But apparently he like ego chows you and like out pistols you from far away, and then you instantly just say, "Who is this guy?" And then you open your friends list and then send him a friend request like mid game. Like it's just like a hilarious moment. And like Tools has the clips saved on his hard drive, and he sent that to me.
Oh my God! I really just fucking came at me like that. I gotta add him after that for sure.
Honestly, that's fair. That's a solid. That sounds like me. It's a good clip though.
What reminds you the most of Halo 5 within Halo Infinite?
Yeah, that's actually a tough one, honestly. I mean, I guess it's to me it's not similar at all, but it's like on the right path. Like we do have the sprinting and we do have the sliding, and then now we have the bandit as well. And honestly, thrust to being an equipment in this game. There are definitely some similarities. Which is nice. Again, with how much I love Halo 5, I like having those things in the game just because it's something that I think is really good competitively, and it's something that I like taking advantage of being a player in the game.
Absolutely. Now, you talked about GoldenEye being one of your first shooters, but what's your foundational shooter? The shooter that had you feeling like, okay, I want to compete and maybe even try to go pro?
Honestly, growing up, I played a lot of shooters, as you can imagine, right? Halo was definitely my main game for sure, but I played a lot of Call of Duty and I played a lot of Gears of War as well. I'd say Call of Duty, if anything, was the other game that I maybe wanted to compete in. I used to play a lot of game battles growing up. I would always watch tournaments and things like that. But yeah, Call of Duty is probably my second favorite shooter besides Halo.
Favorite weapon throughout Halo?
Throughout all Halo, I would say the sniper for sure, hands down.
Fair enough. And which Halo specifically did you feel the most dopamine from?
It's so weird to say Halo 5 because of how easy it is to hit shots, but honestly, I would say Halo 5 just because the ceiling that you can hit with that weapon is something that not many people could hit, and it just you can do just insane things with that. So to me, it was the most fun.
I think I remember like maybe a Twitter thread that you started talking about it, where it's like, yeah, Halo 5 has a lot more bullet magnetism, but like I guess it allowed for more like creative expression with the gun, maybe like because it's a little bit harder to hit the shot in Halo Infinite, like you just have less like pop off moments. And for me, it's the opposite, where it's like because it's harder, it's more rewarding when you do finally hit the shot.
Right.
You just maybe going to be less consistent. I mean, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I just think I mean, like you said, it is the opposite. I think the way I look at it in Halo 5 is like the floor is easier, like everybody can hit snipes, but the things that people could do when they were on fire with the sniper, it's like, wow, like this guy is insane. And I feel like that's something that people couldn't replicate. I feel like in Infinite, I will say now, like people have gotten really good with the sniper. So more and more people are hitting shots, but I feel like when people do hit shots, it looks, the POVs look pretty similar when, you know, Sparty's getting a no scope or Renegade's getting a no scope. Like I feel like there's not much separation between those points of views anymore, just because of I guess like how dumbed down the sniping is now. It's kind of like, I don't know, just it's not like as exciting.
Moving down the line, who's been your favorite duo to team up with over your Halo career?
Favorite duo, honestly, I would say two people. One being Eco. I teamed with him for 2 MCC Throwback Halo 3 events, and although we didn't pull off a win, he's always been one of my really good friends in gaming in Halo. And then also we actually teamed back in my early days in H2A, so some of my first events, and I always liked playing with him. I always liked how he looks or his outlook on the game. But if not him, I would say Renegade. Just because, for one, I mean, so Renegade obviously is insane, but I think me and him look at the game very similarly as far as competition goes, and like we just want to be the best, right? And I feel like we bring out the best in each other. And then also on top of that, I feel like I can't say like Royal 2 is my duo or like Snakebite's my duo just because they are already like that package deal. So I never thought either of them were my duo just because of that. I know that sounds weird, but like
not
having
at all.
Renegade on the team now, it's like, all right, this guy, like I can definitely call this guy my duo.
No, that's an intriguing take you have, because yeah, you're right. I think if anybody were to say Royal 2 or Snakebite were their favorite duo, it'd be like, wait, aren't they the duos? I mean, that's got to be like one of the most defined duos in the HCS. So I think that it makes perfect sense. All right, FaZe is getting called to the main stage, and your opponent walks forward. Who's your favorite rival? Who do you want to see across the main stage?
In Halo Infinite now, it's like it's got to be Optic, right? I feel like I think I don't know the stats on this, but I swear we've played them the most since we picked up Renegade. But yeah, it's always a good time playing them. The matches are always insanely close. The crowd is always super loud. Obviously, they got the green wall backing them. Whether it's for or against us, it's something that we absolutely feed on, and it's always going to be a series that people want to watch. And I feel like as a spectator, as a player, like I love putting on a show, and that's exactly what people want to see is FaZe versus Optic.
Couldn't agree more. I know whenever Eli and I are casting and we get FaZe versus Optic, we're really leaning into the El Clasico element of that. We love seeing that rivalry play out, so that's a great answer as well. What are your current settings?
I play Bumper Jumper. Funny enough, I switched during the Halo 3 days, obviously, whenever it first became a thing. I only switched to Bumper Jumper. Again, bringing this back to like the montaging aspect. I saw a montage, and I saw a guy picking up Sniper with the B button. And like obviously at the top, like left or right or whatever it was, it says like hold and then the button and then whatever weapon it was. And I was like, why this guy's picking up Sniper with the B button? I'm like, that is so weird. And I like went to the layout and I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like I want to play on this. So that's like how I started initially playing on that, and I've just been playing on it ever since. As far as sensitivity goes, I play on a slower sense, which is, I guess, surprising for a lot of people just because of the way I play. But I guess I make it work. It's kind of weird. I feel like nobody really plays a sensitivity like this. I have my Excel at 4, my horizontal at 3, and then my vertical at 6.
Oh wow, yeah, that 3 is very low, especially for the times I see you hitting montage 360. You'd almost think that the repulsor tech that you're really good at wouldn't even be possible on 3 sensitivity.
Yeah,
so I
right.
guess a little combination of making sure that your Y axis is double and you have a pretty high acceleration. So I guess that makes some gives some method to the madness. But very interesting to hear your take on that.
I was curious, do you play Claw, and what controller do you use?
Yeah, so I do claw. I've been clawing since the beginning of Halo 5, just because there's so many more buttons that you needed to press. And then I do use a Battle Beaver, and there's no buttons on the back. It's still the Xbox One S version, so it's like the default from the Xbox One days. But yeah, literally nothing special about the controller, nothing on the back, no special anything else on the controller. It's just basically a default.
You talked about how your role has changed over the years with this new roster. You have Renegade in place of Lethal. You used to be the main Slayer, it felt like, for now FaZe. Where do you feel like your role settles in on? If you had to pick one, OBJ, Blue Guy, Support, main Slayer, where do you kind of see yourself fitting in now?
It's honestly really hard to say. I feel like I find myself doing a lot of everything. I feel like it really depends on like the map and mode, as weird as that sounds. I feel like I like to put a lot of pressure on the other team, so I like to take as many fights as possible. I like to put as much damage down as possible, and I like to be the guy who has 2 or 3 people searching for him. So if I can do that for my team, that's like the ideal role that I want to try to put myself in, just so I can take off as much pressure as possible for my teammates, so they can basically activate and do whatever they want to do on the map.
That's that sneaky pickle.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always something to a gamer tag. Real quick, this is just a question I just thought of. Your camera setup is exactly like what I saw from you on any main stage, really, with the directly lined up with your monitor. Is that because you try to create as similar of an experience to the main stage at home, or do you just not care?
Honestly, no, I didn't even think about that. So, I mean, I guess it just works out like that. Got to be as comfortable on the stage as possible, though. So that makes sense.
Closing things out, you guys seem to have great chemistry on that FaZe roster. I got to ask, who's got the best sense of humor? Who's kind of like breaking up when there's a little bit of tension in the room? Who's breaking that up with a little bit of well-timed humor?
Well-timed humor. I mean, I guess as far as humor goes, it's got to be real too, obviously, right? But the thing is, like, it's so tough because like when we're scrimming, we're all so serious and we're so intense that like his humor, like, I mean, he's not like cracking jokes and stuff like that mid scrim or anything like that. So it's kind of like if 2 people are getting into it and it's kind of getting heated, like the third person or the fourth person will like maybe say something to kind of lower the tension or kind of like get us to agree and like push us in the right direction. So if you're not in the argument, like someone kind of steps up and like diffuses the situation a little bit. But honestly, yeah, we don't really like. It's not a very fun or like amusing time whenever it's scrim time. I feel like it's a very serious thing, like day in and day out.
That's really interesting to hear, Eli, because when we talk to a lot of pros, they're like, whatever, scrims. Well, we're just fishing for intel. But it almost like feels like you could see that when you look at the scrim results just on Halo Data Hive. It's like, wow, they're playing a lot of scrims and B, winning a lot of scrims. So I actually think that makes a lot of sense. Eli, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it just sounds like you guys hold each other accountable to probably a degree that other teams don't. I mean, that's the only reason that maybe you guys would have an argument, I guess, is like maybe you guys feel passionately about different plays, or like, I'm just curious, like, could you give an example of like an argument that happens in scrims? Is it like, well, I shouldn't have pushed that guy because of X, Y, and Z, and then the other person's like, no, you need to push that and help me. Like what's an example of like a scrim argument?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just that, right? It's like a situation will happen in game, and like it could cause us to lose the map, right? And like it'll get heated because of that. Like maybe the game will end, and someone will be like, "Yo, you got to push this here," and then the person like maybe gets a little defensive about it. He's like, "No, dude, like you just got to stay alive." You know what I mean? So it's kind of this back and forth. Like it happens all the time. Like I feel like the most heated, I guess like some memories I have are like me and PJ maybe getting into it, like we're like just yelling at each other, right? But then like the next game will start and be like, "Yo, PJ, snipers behind you." You know what I mean? Like we kind of just like we brush it off our shoulders so quick. It's never personal with us. Like no matter how heated it gets, like we know everybody is on the same page together, and that we all have the same goal, right? So it's just something that we know on a day-to-day basis.
That must be a fun like team atmosphere to be a part of, and probably why you guys have stayed together forever. It's like guys just really want each other to be the best possible players you can be. So that's awesome.
Yep, definitely.
Now we have our final question of the quick questions. This is a new thing that we started off recently doing as well. Our next guest is going to be one of your Halo rivals, Lucid. We've been giving each guest, the previous guest, a chance to ask the next guest a question. So if you were in front of Lucid, what would you ask him? We'll do it for you in the next episode.
Oh, okay. I would say I would want to ask him his current thoughts, or his thoughts on the current state of competitive Halo as far as the settings and the maps and all that.
Yeah, we're definitely going to ask him that, because he's been very, I guess, like outspoken in a lot of ways on social media, and I've seen like you and a few others chime in. So yeah, we'll definitely make sure we ask him that.
All right, that will do it for another incredible episode of Tide the Leader. I want to thank Frosty for coming on board. I want to thank every single Halo pro that has agreed to come onto this show. Eli and I didn't really know what kind of feedback or response we were going to get. Are pros even going to want to come on and talk to us? And man, with just like an overwhelming amount of support, not only from the fans in the community, but the pros have been equally as supportive to share their stories and document all of this incredible Halo history that we know is out there. It's just not really been put into podcast form yet. So I know that gets Eli and I really excited. We feel like we're doing the best we can to document all of this epic history for you guys, the fans, and we couldn't do it without guys like Frosty, who are creating the history as we speak. Frosty, before we go, do you have any quick thoughts or any shout outs, anything you want to get off your chest before we conclude this episode?
I mean, just want to say thank you guys for having me on. It was a great time, honestly. And I think it's super cool to, get as many pro players wrangled up and, pick their brains a little bit. So this is something that's super cool to have, especially in the current state of Halo.
Very fluid throughout the game, whereas before, like in game one, we were seeing them try to set up and make these team pushes happen. Instead, we're seeing fluid movement to get nasty triple kills, and he's gonna get the overkill off Spawn. Frost is doing nasty things.